All right, all right. In today's episode, we are calling out our mess. Sometimes the things that are holding us back can feel like a overhanging cloud or something looming and lurking in the shadows. But today, we are calling it out and coming face to face with it so that we can overcome it. You ready? All right, let's get into it. Hey, it's Niara, and welcome to Confessions of an Ex-Perfectionist, where we talk about the hangups and holdups of being a perfectionist, and instead trading that in for a new approach on life, where we find the balance between striving for excellence while also doing things that are fulfilling and true to ourselves, honoring who we are as we strive to become all that we desire to be. Perfection is overrated, and you are way too amazing to worry about being perfect. Let's chat. Affirmation of the day. I let go of what no longer serves me. So recently I was having a conversation with someone and I was telling them about launching this podcast and what it was about and what I hope to do with it and the whole premise of overcoming perfectionism and all that. And they commended me for speaking on what they saw as vulnerable and having the courage to talk about something so raw and so personal. And it was so interesting because I didn't view it as vulnerable or raw thing. And further in the conversation, I explained that for me, I had to call out perfectionism. And calling it out is saying, you won't have a hold on me. No, I will not let you run rampant in my life. I'm going to call you by your first name. I'm going to call you by what your mama call you. And straight up say, you will not have a hold on me anymore. I'm calling you out perfectionism on your mess, in the ways you hold me back, in the ways you keep me from being my best self. I find that whenever you're trying to face or overcome a problem, calling it out, giving it a name, and really stepping outside of it can help you better attack, understand, analyze what it is, and how to get on the other side of it. And something I learned about myself, it is necessary for me to externally process stuff, whether that be talking it out with someone, writing it down in journaling. I found that it was very important for me to get all the commotion, all the feelings that was swirling around in my head outside of myself. Because I found when I kept things internal, kept it locked inside, that just didn't work for me. And I know there are people who are internal processors who can, go within themselves, resolve it in themselves. And that's awesome. I realized I needed to get it out. And that is such an interesting quality of mine because I think I've always been a sensitive, very feely individual. And I'll say within my specific family, I would say there are more internal processors than external processors. So if there was ever something we need to talk through, there were people who were nah, who just they want their alone time. They're going to, process within themselves. And the next day they come out, oh yeah, it's all cool. It's all solved. And then there was me who was can we talk about this? Or nah, just because time has passed doesn't mean it's been worked through. That specific method didn't necessarily work for me. So with any conflict or anything you need to get over, what's worked for me is calling it out for what it is. And you know what's interesting? So Inside Out 2 came out this year. So I finally saw the film a couple months after it came out. I saw a bunch of good reviews, people giving it, it's praise. It's wow, it's a great sequel. And it's just a great film within itself. And of course, in the previews, you see the introduction of a couple of characters, but kind of the main, I don't even know if I could say antagonist, but one of the main emotions that kind of really drives the plot of this movie is the emotion anxiety. Now, this talk about anxiety has been, I would say, very prominent in this recent generation. Naming things anxiety, getting to understand anxiety and all that, that has been a newer conversation than in past generations. So in watching the film, you see all the emotions, and it's such a great movie that children can understand and even adults can take something away from it. You see anxiety doing her thing, like, oh, this will help Riley. That's the human character that all the emotions are a part of. And when you see the personification of anxiety and you see like, okay, so anxiety is coming up with valid reasons, like they're coming up with reasoning that makes sense, or I see how she's coming up with that conclusion. However, how she's going about it is not particularly healthy. There will be one scenario where it's like, all right, cool. She was able to get through this one instance, but then the consequences of what she got over for that one scenario ended up causing more mess for other things going forward. And it just seemed to be a running wheel of trying to keep up, trying to get ahead, trying to be safe. Specifically with anxiety, it was like, oh, trying to be cautious. And it's like, oh, it's anxiety about the future. So thinking about every possible scenario. And like there's such a great personification of anxiety in that movie. I saw some discussion of people were like, oh, I don't know if I want to watch it because it might be triggering, or it might be, they didn't know how they would respond to the movie. And of course, the movie's not a must watch. I'm not forcing anybody to watch it. But what I found helpful in seeing the movie is like, being able to see the patterns, give the name to what is going on, see how it's negatively impacting my life, and figuring out how to work with it. Like the end of the movie is so beautiful. Even with the first movie, when it was like, oh, happiness versus sadness, they realized they needed each other. Kind of the conclusion of this movie, it's a similar sentiment of like, all these emotions are what make us complex humans, you know? And it's about finding harmony between them all. It's such a cute movie. I highly suggest watching it. Because even in the end, after a big blow up, when they realized they had to keep anxiety in check, it was like, we're not going to abandon you because it's okay to feel anxious. That's part of being human. However, we need to keep you in harmony, sister. Like, don't go trying to take over the spaceship and go crazy again, you know? But there is necessary things. Like being anxious, it does make you, it makes you think about the future. It makes you think about possible outcomes. And that can be a useful thing. But when it becomes too much, it could be more unhelpful than not. And so to bring it back to this specific podcast about perfectionism, or whatever it is in your life that is having an impact on how you feel about yourself, whether it be insecurity, doubt, fear, shame, embarrassment, it could be whatever emotion. It can be helpful to call it out and tell it what it's not going to do in your life. Okay? So for today's exercise, whatever emotion or whatever feeling or whatever it is that you think has a hold on you that you want to start working towards, I want you to write a letter to it. You say, dear fear, dear doubt, dear imposter syndrome, whatever it is, you can write it from a perspective of an old dear friend, something you've carried and known for a very long time, but going forward, it has to be different and there has to be change. Or write it from like a breakup perspective, like, hey boo, this isn't working anymore. Or you could go full Mean Girls burn book style. You know, you could call it whatever, but it's important to get it out. You could list the reasons why this feeling hasn't been helpful to you. And you could list the reasons on how leaving it behind will benefit you. You could come up with a reason for almost anything, for real. You could come up with a reason to keep or to continue anything, for real. But if you know you want to make a change, go ahead and state the reasons why you want to let it go. And let that be your point of focus. So yes, back to the original conversation of seeing doing this podcast as like a courageous and like vulnerable and raw thing. To me, it feels more like rebellion. To me, it feels like resistance. It's like, nah, I'm pushing back on perfectionism. I'm pushing back. Like, yes, the reasoning has been there. It has been a deep-rooted thing for a while, but no more. There's a fire behind this. Me talking with you and sharing these exercises and stories is me pushing back against perfectionism. And I will continue to say, like, overcoming and reframing anything is always a journey. especially if it's been some time of you carrying this weight. So I'm here to give you boop, 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 your weekly power-ups. Doing this work will strengthen ourselves, and that in turn will pour into our lives. It will pour into the people around us. It will pour into our relationships and loved ones. Whether it's a fiery or more timid expression, you do what you need to do. Because whatever form it takes, it is moving you one step forward. And that's what this journey is about. One step at a time. Yes, so that's it for today's episode. Be sure to stay encouraged. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next week.